Hello, hello everyone. Ah, this picture. What a lovely picture. So, actually I took the time and I sat down and I wrote myself a little document about some thoughts that I'd had about the series and this fourth game. Just kind of put it all into my perspective, as it were. So one thing I want to kind of mention before I get into this is to remember that for both my praise and criticism, any particular moment, well, here we'll make it simple. If I say one nice thing and two bad things, that doesn't mean it's a net negative, because there is quality to these things, right? They might be just minor complaints. They might not actually interfere with stop that. They might not actually interfere with things. We're just gonna listen to the chill music while I talk. So, with that in mind, let's start off with the very first thing. Fourth game. Visuals, music-wise, they did some really good stuff in this game. Like the Black Workshop, I loved doing the Black Workshop. So those robots, you got the weird look of it all. It's kind of something that we've been teased with for a little while before we got to see it. Music was fantastic, same idea. Stop that. I wonder if there's an easier way to... You know what, let's... Ooh, if I go to the backstory. Look at that screen. And there's a little bit of music to be heard. Yeah, that'll work. Yeah. So this next part is actually kind of a mixed bag for me. One thing I did like with regards to Osborn is that it always felt, well, it came across. They did a good job, I think, in always making sure Osborn's plans always had backups, it felt like, right? Like, it wasn't just that everything worked out his way, which it basically did, but he had fallback plans, for example, in case things didn't. Take, for example, Cold Steel 3, when the 4th Armored Division was around, right? And they're talking about that, you know, if they would bring in martial law and all that sort of stuff. Now, to a degree, there's no way he could predict whether or not, perfectly predict whether or not the Class 7 would be able to stop the Dark Dragon, right? Having the 4th around made great backup for that. Alright? Same idea with the, and then, of course, that feeds into when we were doing the Growl stuff, all the robots and weird stuff that was showing up in the city of Heimdall, the 4th could act and intervene on, right? It was a backup plan. Or consider the 4th game, or right, with the rivalries, right? Let's say, for the sake of discussion, Leanne had bested us in the rivalry. Well, what was she gonna do? She would still try to face off and take on Osborn. And if she had somehow won the rivalry, what was gonna happen? Well, we know she would probably do something just like Reen had done. Use a few moments that she had of self-control, blow herself up, taking along Ishmelga. Right? Rutger, I could see him doing the same thing, right? Seeing himself already dead, right? Because he's an immortal, deciding, you know, he's gonna do this, keep Fee safe, right? Crow probably could have done it. Then, of course, Osborn himself. Osborn, well, as we saw, he always had complete control of himself. So, there's a decent chance that even if Osborn won it all, not that he necessarily wanted to, but if he did, he could have then used that opportunity to destroy himself, right? Rufus was maybe the problem one there. If Rufus had somehow won it all, that probably would have not stopped Ishmelga. Not sure on that one. Cedric, I'm sorry, buddy. I don't think you ever really had a chance on this one. So again, like, the rivalries, who really won them didn't really matter. His plan was well done enough that success or failure on his part, or on what he had planned, could still achieve the goal that he wanted. And that's being clever. So that's great. So yeah, it wasn't just that he had a plan. It's that he had backups in case Plan A went wrong. Not that it necessarily did, but with that, that, however, becomes kind of a problem with him with how the game decided to go near the end, though. The first couple games, right, Game 1 and Game 2, he definitely was like, this guy's a problem. He's an antagonist. He's maybe a full-on villain. There was lots of interesting build-up. He did not seem like he was a good guy. And then they kind of, undid that throughout this fourth game. And the problem there, I'd say even during the third game, because the third game kind of, the plan was, I guess, to strangle Altina to death, and then not exactly nice. The problem was that Ishmelga never really stepped up as a villain. There's no one about, like, because of how much Osborn had kind of been built up, I wasn't really invested in well, I wasn't invested in stopping him anymore because he was right. But I wasn't really. But because we'd, built him up as a villain, I wasn't invested in, like, just joining him or teaming up with him or not stopping him. So that kind of left little momentum in terms of my emotional investment in the final struggles. Also, the fact that everything had kind of been, all four games is kind of his plan that he'd been working on for years and years. 4 games of being a puppet the whole way through. Certainly, I'm not going to give the game a medal for that one. Anyways, character moments, though. There are some. I think, actually, in terms of pure character moments, I think, because this is an area I did have investment in, the fourth game, when they had them, by and large, the character moments in the fourth game were the best in the series. We got for a lot of them, we got that payoff, I felt, that had been building up, which is great. I had my complaints about Ash, certainly, but he was so much more likable in this fourth game. And it's interesting because while he was, he's always kind of be the troubled bad boy character archetype, it would have been so much easier, for me at least, like, it would have taken so very little to maintain him with that quality without going overboard, it felt like. So, like, really early on, and especially when you're establishing a new character, early on matters. We have that moment where he is, there's those 3 guys, he's maybe conned, they want to have a word with him. So the four of them, they head out back, right? And then he beats them up. Maybe he throws the first punch. Maybe they try and sucker him. Who doesn't really matter so much. They were clearly looking for trouble, right? And he beats them. Now, if he had just thrashed them but good, and then, you know, intimidated them and sent them running, right? He'd still clearly be like, he's a troublemaker because he's getting involved in these gambling things and maybe seducing ladies away from their boyfriends, and he's picking fights. So he still has this troubled bad boy angle, right? And that's fine. And he's, you know, he sends them on his way. But he's not like, he's not abusive about it, I guess would be the term. He's not like a thug, or however you want to term it. Whereas what he does do is he's beat these guys up, right? And he's about, and they're begging for mercy. And they're completely defeated. And he's about to go to town on this one guy's face with his fists, right? It takes it too far, and it kind of shows this is, you know, how he acts. This is who he is. He has to be physically stopped from punching a beaten man's face in. It's like, hold on a second, what kind of character is this? But the same effect, like making him a bad boy, could have been achieved without going that extra step too far. Musée kind of suffered in a similar way in the storytelling aspect. There was no need to hype her up as this ultimate planning genius. Especially since she, you know, would often get surprised, or she couldn't really commit, or get outplayed. Like, for example, the whole thing when they get attacked, they're having their big fancy meeting with the various other foreign powers, right? She's like, aha, I anticipated we get attacked by Ouroboros, but yeah, you anticipated it, but your ability to predict the bad thing didn't let you do anything about it. Which is... And honestly, her plans weren't that amazing. The idea of like, yes, there's an evil... The Empire is going to try to invade everybody. Maybe we should fight it. Is, like, one of the most basic ideas. I guess the conflict there is, like, they couldn't have Osborn not be the unstoppable force that he was. Like, again, like, nothing really ever causes Osborn a setback. Yuna, I like Yuna a lot, actually. For all she, in some ways, got the short end of the stick in terms of, well, there's the point of the fourth game, or the third game, where they're talking about Ash is this bundle of potential, and Kurt is a swordmaster genius, yada yada yada. And then they're like, and she went to the police academy. What Yuna really had going for her, she made a great second protagonist, right? Like, if Rena had been out of things for longer, out of both classes, both class, for the new class 7 and old class 7, Yuna was, I think, the best suited to take up the leadership role. I don't think anyone else would have done nearly as well as it. Kind of building on this character thing. Say what you will, game, and those of you at home. I think the harem angle, it was amusing and perhaps made the most sense. But for the most part, like the little love confessions and all that sort of thing, I really quite liked them. Well, they were well done, for the most part. Both Class 7s. I liked both Class 7s. Apparently, first Class 7 isn't so popular. I quite liked them. I don't know if it was always intended to make a new Class 7. Reen being the teacher, though. Good twist. I enjoyed that at the start of the third game. Like, you don't see a lot of main protagonists in that kind of authority role, right? Like, what's a good example? Okay, well, like since I'm gonna reference this game later on, Final Fantasy IV. Cecil the Paladin or the Dark Knight, you know, he starts the game with authority, but you know, within like the first hour of that game, he's just leading a ragtag bunch of equals. With some of them, such as a certain Spoony Bard, perhaps even if you wanted to get into rankings, having more rank than him. Kind of example there. What are like, well, yeah, Final Fantasy VI, for example. Again, like, if you're gonna name a main PC on that, you'd probably say Terra, or maybe Locke, or Celis, maybe, depending on how you want to. But they all have their kind of their roles. But again, they're not in charge of the others in that same sense. Same with like Cloud. Cloud isn't really in charge of the rest of the group, and he starts off working for Avalanche as with no one really working for him. So it's kind of like, yeah, a lot of JRPGs, if they don't go for like, you know, the wandering hero, yeah, it's just unusual, and I liked that. I thought that was a great way to explore some good character stuff. Yeah. I do feel like that may have complicated the story they wanted to tell, though. Like, this kind of touches on, I don't know if a second Class 7 was always intended or not. But, you know, to then introduce an entire new cast, give us the time to have them have proper build-up and character arcs and all that sort of thing, on top of building on top of what was already established. Difficult. They still managed that, I think, but how to put this? Like, I just don't feel like Cold Steel 1 had less need to kind of tie in all those previous people. Didn't have to do that at all because there were no previous people, so we could focus more on just establishing the first Class 7. And the complications coming up, right? This had to be like, all right, we're going to fit in the new people. We're going to make sure the old people get their call-ins. We've got to establish the stuff going forward. Right? And we've got to resolve some of the stuff. And we got to properly build on what came before. And it was a lot to work around. And so I guess another complication there. Kind of stretching things a bit thin in the fourth game. Like, I mentioned it, I've mentioned before, like, maybe I'm wrong, but in terms of actual scenes where Reen directly interacts with Osborne, including the final scene, I think there was all of 3, maybe 4 times in 2 games. I think it was the final bit with Osborne. You know, that a very tiny short chat. After, and then with the fight and the resolution of that, there was the tiny bit in the Black Workshop, and I believe you got to meet with Osborne briefly in when the group goes to Heimdall in Cold Steel 3. it's not a lot. Especially because they decided, oh yes, this relationship with his father is a big deal. Barely interacted. Like I said, that's 3 interactions across 200-hour-plus games. They could have done... I feel like more would have been worth the time. And that's, I guess, a complication of all these other characters. So many characters. Let's see what else I want to talk about. Ah, yes! So, I liked, for the most part, I liked the expansion of the lore. Right? The revelation of... These are 2 Septarians, and they fought, and they created this weird amalgamation thing. And then they were... The various clans that kind of resolved it. I thought that was an interesting angle. I liked it. The way the world kind of got... The nature of the world kind of being touched on in a way that I certainly didn't expect. Liked it. I think it was badly placed in the story, but I quite liked it. The stinger from the Grand Master, great. Quite liked that too. The Black Records were neat. Okay. In terms of this story, I found the additional record, the final extra record that they get, completely unnecessary. It didn't add anything to the story to have this 3rd record get revealed. Well, the content of the 3rd record didn't really matter. The bit about the source of the record, that was the interesting revelation there. And that, I'm sure, will have payoff in further games down the road. So it had to be done. So that was... the scene where they kind of reviewed everything and touched on everything was great. Like I said, yeah, they didn't need to complicate it. They could have just had that Azoth revelation then, I feel like. So here's one of the things. If the game has to reveal a big setting-changing bombshell, like when Mick Burns, not just that he's from another world, which is big enough on its own, but that, you can't, if you sail west for 10 miles, you just stop. The world is fundamentally different from just being like a world you would have thought it was. And then they're like, don't think about that thing I just revealed, that important, epic, massive, setting-changing fact. Don't think about it. That's from a storytelling perspective, that's that's not good. That's not how people work. That's the kind of thing that you want to just kind of have as its own moment, and then have it sink and percolate and let them properly appreciate this revelation. If you have a big revelation and then you want to follow it up with, but forget about that. You really want to think about the revelation and the importance that you want to give to it. Which is, I think, perhaps some of my issues that I had with the 4th game. It seemed to lose focus when it could have needed it more. I mean, there was 3 other games to do the setup in, and a lot of this 4th game kind of just surprised with rules and things, and then quickly moved past. I feel like part of it was like they didn't want to examine the main conflict in character, right? there's no one stop to discuss properly. Sit down, like, because you could easily imagine a scene where they're all gathered around the table, right, and they're discussing what Osborn's up to, like really up to. The idea that he has set all of this in motion to ultimately destroy Ishmelga and free the country from the curse. Now, and then you could have interesting character moments where, again, they could express themselves in ways that show how they feel about these matters and their nature. Yuna, for example. Yuna as a character and her third personality and all that, I don't think she would ever agree to what Osborn was doing. Right? Like, there's no way she would have thought that, no matter how necessary it seemed, that she would have been like, yeah, no, we start a giant world war. She would never have backed that plan, no matter how, especially in this case, absolutely necessary it was. Whereas Musée, for example, she could have argued with Yuna. They could have shared their viewpoints, because Musée, obviously, with Mille Mirage, she is the kind of character where she'd be like, no, maybe this plan has worth and validity to it. I mean, either way, they need to play their role in his plan, right? Because they've been so outmaneuvered. But they still could have discussed the plan, see where everyone kind of fell in terms of, is it necessary? Is it right? Should we be supporting this thing? All that sort of stuff. It wouldn't... people could have even brought up the question. Is it okay to make this sacrifice now? Or do we let Ishmelga continue to haunt the nation for another 1,000 years? I think there could have been a good scene about that. I was like, it feels like a missed opportunity. Like those are moments where they could have, because that's kind of needed that. Just like we had the Black Workshop moment and the discussion with Nielsen, where they kind of, hey, hold on, let's talk about everything that happened and tie it all in. Something like that could have been good. Which leads to my next point. The dialogue needed a second once over in this game. Which is, I understand. Now, this I understand is a problem, especially with big, massive games like this. The more complex they become, the longer they become, the more things have to be, make sure they match up to all the prior stuff, but all the stuff going forward. And there were some definite hiccups for me in that sense. Like, they established the rules for the rivalries with Crow, and then immediately they're like, alright, so the world's got to be at war for the rivalries. It doesn't. It's a death match. It wasn't. And that's... They could have established... like, he didn't have to say the world has to be at war. Right? He could have just said, hey, each rivalry needs more conflict before it happens. And then he could have then maybe talking with doing, then that explains the small duel you have with him. You have a bigger, you fight an airship, and then you fight Rutger. You invade Orcus Tower, you do all that sort of stuff, fight Leanne. Leanne could have maybe done a revelation about how the little skirmishes you've done so far aren't going to be enough going forward. The world's going to need more. It would have been a relatively easy fix that wouldn't have had been like, hey, here's the rules, break them. Just little things that would have made the story flow better. There's another thing I wanted to say about this. I think this fourth game did battles the best. In terms of, obviously I complained about the fights where it's like, did you remember to equip your anti-confusion gear for this fight? But overall, in terms of difficulty balance, I think this game did the best of the four. Like that Primordial Flame thing, I think that was a great setup, right? Obviously, something like the Primordial Flame, maybe a bit too strong for just your regular thing, but the way they introduced it to set up for your conflict with the Schmelga and how the Schmelga fight, that was a well done little bit of setup there. I liked that. Good setup, good delivery. The tank in Aaron Village was great. Like, part of what I liked about the tank, right, is it wasn't some sort of weird flexing gyrocopter or whatever Gilbert likes to use. It wasn't some weird clown assassin robot on rolly balls that, you know, that Ouroboros likes to use. All that sort of stuff. It was like, this is just a tank. It's a tank. It has a big gun and heavy armor plates. It's just a straight up tank. I loved it. I really liked it. Should have been in the maybe it should have been in the fortress fight, but I liked it. So yeah, battle-wise, in terms of the actual battles, I think the fourth game did it best. Had some great duels too. And a lot of the build-up to the fights was really good as well. That said, the post-fight impact was where perhaps there was a problem. The tension of the fights gets undone afterwards. It felt like in a lot of cases. Well, my primary example, right? When Oliver is shown to be alive, right? You know, the heroes bust onto the, you know, the heroes are fighting everybody on the, getting up to the bridge. You know, they defeat them, right? Seems like, you know, after the initial ambush by the villains, the heroes have turned things around. But then the villains up the stakes a little. They've got their ions, right? They've got, you know, all that sort of stuff going for them now. Stakes are raised. Then, Oliver comes in on his shining moment. He turns things around. But then, Cedric goes, you know what? No. Let's do this fight anyways. And then before the conflict happens, oh no, never mind. Osborne interrupts things and makes everyone go away. Because he was always watching and in control of it. The people were never in danger. And that kind of kills some of the tension in a lot of them. Like, you know, the Rutger fight. It's fairly... Well, there's a chance that Rutger never really intended to win. And you know, a lot of fights kind of like, when you look back on it, sometimes not even that much past it. Like, Campanelle and Mariabel in the Imperial Fortress. There was no tension there. They were only there, they were basically being punch clock villains. They were doing, as the game said, the bare minimum to do their job. And they, as villains, had no investment in actually stopping us. In fact, didn't want to really stop us, because they needed us to get ahead. But little things like that. The battles didn't have meaning. And then there's just weird instances where they're like in Orcus Tower, where you fight McBurn. And then that Leviathan shows up, and McBurn's like, ha, I'm going to burn it. Oh, it's immune to magic. Well, I'm going to wreck it anyways with my sword. And then like, haha, but then the vendors show up. And you're like, well, nice, but you weren't necessary? I'm pretty sure he could have handled the Leviathan on his own. The fight with us was over at that point. We had little things like that. Which I think was also kind of like with the problem with how they treated Western Arabonia. I know I've said during the second game about how the way they were doing things was so they could try and have it be... They could have the game be serious without it being too overarching serious. Because they made the West where all the real bad violence of the Civil War was happening. And they could have the East be a little calmer. But thus kind of letting your characters kind of do their less, you know, the typical JRPG stuff without it being too weird. And then, of course, the third game kind of went and showed, oh, actually, no, things were fine in the West. Everything was just fine. Just fine. Just fine. More talking. Man, this is turning into a long one. But that's fine. It's my channel, and I will ramble on for as long as I wish. Though, of course... I offer my thanks to anyone who's gotten this far listening. Arabonia, as a setting, quite liked it. I think setting up Arabonia as a country, and both from the prior two games, like prior two series, Trails of the Sky and Crossbell, and then how they did it here, was top-notch. I didn't feel any kind of disconnect between how they had been portrayed in those other games and how they got portrayed when we were actually there. Like with what we learned about the nobility and all that, the idea that the people in charge of their embassies in these foreign countries, with Arabonia having the top-down kind of nobility structure and their pride and all that sort of stuff, that they would kind of come across as these antagonists, these threatening figures, made complete sense, while still, once you actually kind of got into the country and you saw how they treated the kinsmen and the commoner nobility divide and all that sort of stuff, the political expression outside, made sense, along with how it was internally. I liked that. It was well done. Like, I could totally see that if you had some sort of nationalistic, martial, honor-based culture in foreign lands, in terms of how they would project themselves, you could totally see this need to kind of project an impression of strength coming across as kind of this dangerous antagonism. So no, I quite like that. The East-West divide worked well too. Helped make the country feel big, so you didn't have to see it all in one game. And each kind of area had its own kind of distinct culture to it. More so than I think the places in, for example, Liberl had. You know, Liberl's smaller. It makes sense that it's a little more homogenous in that sense. Yeah, so no, I liked, as a setting, Arabonia. Good stuff. Also, the train stuff was really neat. I kind of like getting on the trains and the airships. And rather than, this is a country so small we'll just run everywhere, like Estelle did, or it's all in one city. So that was good. No, I liked Arabonia as a place. Solid. Built well on previous elements. And then when we were actually there. Ishmelga and the Curse. So Ishmelga as an end villain, definitely think worst in terms of perspective of the three series. So in Crossbell, your final fight is basically against Kia, or her power, and it's about saving her. Kia, right? It's very, you're kind of to the degree that, that's important. You got investment in that. In the Trails in the Sky series, it was about dealing with Wiseman. And all the stuff that he had done, and the interactions you'd had with her and him in the previous games. And the stuff he had personally done directly to the characters in your group. They were human antagonists, for all their powers. Schmelga's different. Like, in terms of direct interaction, he only gets, like, we literally get that one bit at the very end of the game where he's just kind of a ball, some eyeballs, and a couple of mouths. And that's our one chance to directly interact with him. And then he's cut down and destroyed. It's weird. He wasn't treated like a person or a villain. Like it's treated more like, well, any of the random monsters you just randomly kill along the way. For all that he was, produced of human malice. His motivation, his origin, not that exciting. Certainly not compared to Kia being a Septarian, remade by the alchemists, and all the interactions she had with everybody. Certainly not compared to Wiseman. He gets to introduce Ouroboros. He gets to introduce the idea of the Anguis. He's got his mind control stuff that he's using, directly on the PCs, like like Reen had his angry eye moments, but I think Joshua's revelations about being controlled and all that by Wiseman and the stuff that they kind of had to work around to get around that, much better. He's a Zeramus. Yeah, he's behind everything, but in like an academic, vague technicality sort of way. He's a thing made by some angry people that we have no interaction with from 1,000 years ago that made a robot AI go a little wonky in the brain. Okay. Sure. And then, of course, there was kind of the resolution. For all the game was about no sacrifices and friendship and, there has to be another way and yada, yada, yada. They resorted to just killing him pretty quick. Did Rain ever really change his resolve about killing people? I would argue he never did throughout the series. He never wanted to kill people. He got upset when people died. Valimar was certainly treated like a person. They were all sad when he was quiet. He went through wars without killing anyone. When he did indirectly kill someone with Vulcan, deeply affected him. Schmelga, chop that guy down. We're moving on with our lives. Of course, even though throughout the game he was clearly worried about Crow, and he didn't want, when Rutger started to fade, his first thought was to save him, etc., 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 etc. When Leanne got stabbed, upset, it was weird. Schmalga, not the best villain. I mean, even Alberic, I'd say, was a better villain. And We got more with him and Elisa than Shmelga. Likewise, I feel like the curse, broadly speaking, had some strong missed opportunities. Kind of touching back to that kind of false tension, undone tension thing I kind of mentioned. You may have had to change certain elements of the game. Well, you definitely would have, when I'm talking about this. Of course, you'd have to change the game. But imagine if people like Craig, General Craig, Mama Vander, Yuna's siblings, imagine they were cursed. Right? Not just cursed, not just they were obviously cursed and being all pro-war, but you couldn't just snap them out of it. That the protagonists had to keep what they were doing and their views and all that sort of stuff private and hidden, or else these close family members would turn on them. You know, kind of like Alan was, but not just so easily solved by punching him in the face a bunch. They couldn't just, you know, something that couldn't just be fixed on a case-by-case basis, but that they'd had to go after the source. This kind of relates to kind of the same thing they did with the second game, when they made the West where all the violence was. The bad civil war was going on. All of the... Oh, well, not all of it, but most of the cursing stuff was happening to the military, off-screen, in the divisions you didn't interact with, in Heimdall, where you never got to go. I think the curse had a lot of potential. Just underused. I think that would have, especially in terms of a storytelling perspective, provided more than when it was doing things like making a child want to go back to get his teddy so he could end up in the middle of a conflict. Which was... Okay, Shmelga, I guess you like your dramatic moments. But I guess kind of touches into the explanation of the fallout from everything post-game. It's kind of like me shrugging my shoulders. Could have used more, I guess. The game often gave less when it needed to, and too much of what it didn't need. Like, the upper ranks of the military were supposedly all infested with this Eldritch Horror stuff. There was a giant floating fortress with eyeballs. Weird pail. The salt pail. 5 salt pails popping up. What were people told about the curse? What were they told about what actually happened in regards to Ash shooting the Emperor? What about the fact that all of the other governments knew about the truth of the curse and the magic? And what about all the personality shifts we got to see and how that was explained? Because, you know, we had that one family where the parents were totally in on the war, totally in on smashing Calvard. The daughter basically was running away. Grandma was like, "What's wrong with my children now?" There was the idea that Erebonia was paying reparations. Because I have to kind of ask, for what? None of the other nations were gonna would have tried to push the war, except for, I mean, most of them basically betrayed a bunch of deals that they'd had with Erebonia anyways. It's all a huge thing that really needs to be wrapped up with more, I guess. They just kind of yada-yada'd it and decided this is what we're going for. Don't worry about how we get there. Here's how it plays out. It just kind of left me okay. The wedding scene, though, wonderfully done. Like the way the pictures and the character talkings and all that sort of stuff. The whole picture with 1,000 words really worked there. I felt that connection between all the people in that wedding scene more than I expressed more fully than almost any of the character moments that had in the game it's done. So excellently done there. That wedding, top notch. Alright. Wow. Alright, well. We are down to my last little section I wanted to talk about. The final signal from the Grandmaster. Fantastic. Did its job of making me interested in the next series and what they're bringing up perfectly. Got me hooked. Loved it. Which is, I guess, perhaps kind of how you want to talk about my ultimate feelings of the game. Well, game 3 and 4 I felt stumbled. It wasn't so bad that I didn't want to keep exploring the setting and the broader story. In fact, I'm very much interested in still continuing with the story. I want to find out more. I want to see where it's going. I want to see how they decide to answer these questions. I mean, maybe they're just really better at setting up mysteries than they are at answering them. Maybe that's it. They just need to tighten their focus, I guess. Like Cold Steel. As a series, there's easily enough there. You could have made it a story about class division, the internal politics of a changing nation, that sort of stuff. And that could easily have covered you 2-3 games. And then, of course, mix in your little bit of your Ouroboros and your ancient magics. And, like, you know, that's fine. Like, the kind of, you know, the Infernal Fortress, the Testarossa, like that, all that sort of stuff. The Civil War. There was enough meat there on its own. Same with like the Ashmelga, broadly speaking, as this malevolent force that has been driving these terrible events throughout the story. That on its own could have been a decent, could have been enough to kind of create a core main game arc, right? And about, you know, the protagonists coming into, you know, either they're caught in the conflict between social classes and the inherent tensions between people, yada yada yada, or the group of plucky underdogs taking it on against an eldritch horror from the past. Any one of those could have easily been it on its own. To me, they got too ambitious, and they couldn't mesh the two quite right. Like even the end of the game kind of brings it up too. There wasn't, oh, now that the war is over, suddenly the nobles are all like, ah, we're back in power now. So it's like nothing really came of the whole struggle angles from the first game. There was no moving on. There was no resolution of it. It just kind of, nope, they're back. It's kind of weird. Anyways, yeah, I guess. I guess that's most of my thoughts. Like, these games have a lot. And I like a lot of what they do. Which, I mean, I would not play through these very long games if I didn't enjoy, at the very least, the characters for the most part. Yeah, no, my interest in the fourth game was definitely waning toward the end. Especially compared to the other games as they were approaching their climax. And obviously, we're all gonna enjoy these games in our own way. I just piled up too much. It didn't kill my enjoyment, but I wasn't looking forward to playing more of it the same way I did with some of the others. For good or ill. That said, I am looking forward to the Calvard arc. I think, kind of touching definitely on what I've mentioned before, about this game having to spread everything too thin. Tighten that cast up in the next arc. You need to. There's just too many people. That half the size of the group in a lot of those scenes. I feel like if people could give you the proper moments. But no, I'm definitely going to keep playing the series. I'm looking forward to going forward. I don't know much about the next game, so obviously please don't spoil. These are just kind of my final thoughts on this foursome of games and how it concluded. Things like I would have maybe preferred to see, things I thought were fantastic, things I thought that were not great or weird. Which is like, I guess, here's the thing, right? Because I have investment in these games, I want them to be great. I really do. I'm not the kind of person who is going to be like, yes, time to play 400 hours of something I hate. No. I really like the world, the setting, the characters. Just this one. Maybe it was just too long and too much. Arc fatigue, game fatigue, whatever you want to call it. But it hasn't soured me on this series. And I hope you watching at home haven't been soured on the experience either. Of course, let's have a dialogue on this all. Let's share your thoughts going forward. Things you disagreed with, things you thought that were great moments. Things like I'm happy to hear if like you think this was a part of the game and I thought this part was the best part of the game. Here's why it was great. Here's the elements I thought that built it up and its ramifications. Like, I'm happy to read about them. I would love to read about them. And see what you think is just the best. Because it's fun to know. It's fun to get other perspectives on these sorts of things, right? We can all only have our own experience. But we can see what others like in it. And maybe through that, find different ways to appreciate it ourselves. So if you have thoughts, comments on any of my very long-winded touching on the game, please do put them down below. Let me hear them, or I guess read them. But for now, we are putting the Cold Steel and Legend of Heroes games aside until the next one comes out. So thank you all for watching, and I will talk to you all later. Thank you again for listening to my rant, which, wow, an hour. Which just goes to show there's a lot that this game made me think. And for good, and that definitely is a sign in its favor. So everyone, have a great night, and I'll talk to you later.